Imagine waking up tomorrow and realizing that half the world has been unknowingly mastering the art of longevity, while the other half has been silently racing toward an earlier end. Sounds dramatic, right? But what if I told you it's not only true, it's happening right now in every country, every culture, every age group? Why do women outlive men? Is it biology or something deeper, something changeable? Today, we're going to crack open the mystery, and I warn you, it might just change how you live the rest of your life. You might laugh when you hear that a man's idea of stress relief is wrestling with a bear sized burger, while women meditate through crisis. But here's the punchline: the stats aren't joking. This isn't about blame, it's about awakening. Because if women are living longer, what exactly are men dying from? And more importantly, can we stop it? Stay with me, because by the end of this, you won't just understand the gap, you'll know exactly how to close it. They say time is the great equalizer, but when you look closely at the numbers, time seems to have a favorite. For generations across every continent and culture, women have consistently outlived men. Not by days, not by months, but by years. It's not just a fluke of history or a statistical anomaly. It's biology writing a story we haven't fully understood yet. And here's the question that should shake you a little: why are men leaving the party early? And what secret are women holding on to that gives them the upper hand in life's ultimate game? Let's start at the very beginning, where life itself begins, inside the womb. Before any of us take our first breath, biology already has a say in how we'll experience the world and how long we might remain in it. Scientific studies reveal that baby girls are more likely to survive complications during birth. Yes, even in the earliest chapters of life, females are built with a kind of resilience that seems almost unfair. But what's behind this invisible armor? The answer lies in the intricate machinery of our bodies, the immune system and the hormonal orchestra playing quietly behind the scenes. Now, here's where things get exciting. The female immune system is not just strong, it's strategically strong. Think of it as a high-performing security system that not only detects intruders, but neutralizes them with ruthless efficiency. While men tend to produce a quick, often explosive immune response, like setting off all the fire alarms for a small kitchen fire, women's immune systems are more measured, more adaptive, and more capable of learning. It's the difference between brute force and intelligent defense. This means that women are not only better equipped to fight infections, but they recover faster and with less collateral damage to their own bodies. Now pause and think: if the body is a battlefield, wouldn't you want the army that's precise, resilient, and doesn't burn down its own fortress? And then there's estrogen, the unsung hero in this saga. We often hear about it in the context of emotions, reproduction, or hormonal mood swings, usually with a joke thrown in. But this hormone is doing far more behind the curtain. Estrogen enhances the body's ability to fight disease. It regulates inflammation, boosts the function of immune cells, and even influences how our genes express themselves in moments of crisis. It's like having a built-in life coach whispering, "You've got this," every time the body faces an attack. Men, on the other hand, have higher levels of testosterone, which ironically suppress immune function. So while estrogen is boosting defenses and extending the warranty on life, testosterone, well, it's often sending the repair team home early. Now, before the men in the room start feeling personally attacked, let's make one thing clear. This isn't about superiority, it's about awareness. Because with knowledge comes power, and with power comes the ability to change your story. Here's a pattern interrupt for you. Why do women get accused of being too emotional? But it's men who are more likely to die from preventable health conditions simply because they ignore their emotions and their doctor's appointments. The irony would be funny if it weren't so deadly. But let's return to the deeper biology. There's something magical happening at the chromosomal level too. Women have two X chromosomes. That may sound like a fun piece of trivia, but it's a game changer. The X chromosome carries a large number of genes related to immune function. So if one X has a defect, the other can often compensate. Men with only one X don't get that backup system. It's like going into a war zone with one shield instead of two. Suddenly, the battlefield doesn't look so fair anymore, does it? We also need to talk about oxidative stress. Yes, it sounds like something only health freaks whisper about over kale smoothies, but it's one of the biggest players in aging. Women's bodies tend to manage oxidative stress better, in part due to, you guessed it, estrogen. This hormone helps reduce the damage caused by free radicals, those unstable molecules that quietly rust our systems from the inside out. Less cellular damage means slower aging, lower risk of chronic disease, and more candles on the birthday cake. So when a woman says she's glowing, it might not just be good skincare, it might be biology playing its long game. Even the heart, that poetic symbol of love and life, tells a different story based on gender. Estrogen has a protective effect on cardiovascular health, keeping arteries flexible and reducing the buildup of plaque. This means women generally have lower rates of heart disease during their premenopausal years. Men lacking this hormonal safety net start racking up cardiovascular damage much earlier. Think about that. The number one killer of humans is more likely to strike the gender less biologically prepared for it. But here's the twist that should jolt you a bit: these biological advantages don't make women invincible, they just give them a head start. And for men, that means one crucial thing: you're not doomed, you're just uninformed. Once you understand how these systems work, you can begin to work with them instead of against them. Lifestyle choices, diet, exercise, stress management, these things matter more when you're not getting a hormonal assist. It's like running the same race just with different shoes. And if yours are a little heavier, wouldn't you want to train smarter? Let's pause for a second. Ever wonder why your grandmother might outlive your grandfather by a decade and still be playing bridge while he's been gone since the flip phone era? It's not just because she nagged him into eating vegetables. It's because biology gave her a better foundation and she built on it. Men often ignore their health until it screams. Women listen when it whispers. That one behavioral difference, when paired with the biological edge, changes everything. Now, here's where the urgency kicks in. We're living longer than ever before, but are we living better? The gap between men and women isn't just measured in years. It's measured in lost moments, missed memories, preventable suffering. And once you see the data, once you feel the weight of what's been hiding in plain sight, you can't unsee it. So the question becomes, what are you going to do with this knowledge? Because this isn't just about living longer, it's about earning the right to do so. What if I told you that the biggest threat to men's lives isn't disease, genetics, or even aging, it's the choices they make when they think no one's watching? What if the real killer wasn't hiding in a hospital room, but behind the wheel of a speeding car in a bar fight at 2 a.m.? Or in the decision to say, I'm fine, instead of asking for help? The truth is hard to swallow, but here it is. Men are dying younger, not just because of what happens to them, but because of what they do to themselves. And this isn't a whispered warning, it's a blaring siren. From the earliest moments of boyhood, men are taught that risk is a badge of honor. Jump higher, run faster. Don't cry, don't back down. Be fearless. These lessons, while wrapped in pride and tradition, often become chains that drag them closer to the edge. There's something culturally glorified about being the daredevil, the rebel, the one who walks into fire just to prove he won't flinch. But here's the twist. Fire burns even if you pretend you're immune to it. And men are getting burned badly. Statistics don't lie. Men are exponentially more likely than women to die in car accidents, to overdose on drugs, to engage in violent crime, and to commit suicide. These are not accidents, they are patterns. They are symptoms of a mindset that equates masculinity with invincibility. And that mindset is costing men not just years, but entire lifetimes of potential. Imagine the father who never got to walk his daughter down the aisle, the brother who missed every birthday after his 27th, the friend who never called back because his pride told him not to reach out. This isn't drama, it's data painted in heartbreak. Now let's break the pattern with a little humor. Why do men climb onto rooftops with ladders they duct tape together, while women call a professional? Why do men refuse to ask for directions, even if they've been lost for 45 minutes and the GPS is yelling at them? It's funny until it's not. Because these small behaviors point to a deeper issue. Men are conditioned to believe that vulnerability equals weakness. But what if the opposite were true? What if real strength was the courage to say, I don't know, I need help, or this might be dangerous? Let's zoom out. Risk taking isn't inherently bad. In fact, it's wired into our evolution. Our ancestors survived by pushing limits, exploring the unknown, and hunting danger. But today, that same instinct manifests in different forms: racing cars, extreme sports, reckless drinking, impulsive fights, and silent suffering. The world changed, but our survival wiring didn't get the memo. And while women often internalize caution and social harmony, men are more likely to externalize power through action, even when it leads them to harm. That's not fate, it's programming. And programming can be rewritten. The transition from boy to man often involves unspoken initiations, tests of courage, moments of rebellion, and rites of passage that rarely come with safety nets. Boys are praised for their toughness, their ability to man up, to laugh off pain, to suppress fear. But here's a question to rattle your comfort. What if the definition of being a man is killing men slowly? What if all the applause for being fearless is actually applause for a performance that's quietly destructive? Peer pressure plays its role like a backstage puppeteer, invisible but powerful. From adolescence, young men feel pushed to prove something often to each other. They drive faster, drink more, jump from higher places, pick more fights. And they don't just do it once, they do it again and again, reinforcing a cycle that's cheered in youth but mourned in adulthood. You see the headlines: tragic accident, gone too soon, one bad decision. But beneath the headline is a culture that rewards risk over reason and toughness over truth. Let's pivot again. Risk is not always reckless. It can be transformative. Every breakthrough, every innovation, every leap forward in human history involved risk. The difference lies in intention and awareness. Calculated risk is courage, blind risk is chaos. So when men choose to face fear with wisdom, when they choose growth over ego, they don't just survive, they thrive. Imagine that energy redirected. Imagine a world where men take risks that build, not break. Risks that stretch their minds, not their mortality. But here's the part that doesn't get talked about enough: emotional risk. The kind of risk that requires a man to open up, to confront trauma, to speak truth instead of hiding behind bravado. This, more than any physical feat, may be the greatest leap a man can take, because the body can only take so many hits before it gives out, but the heart can rebuild if it's given a voice. Yet, how many men are taught to leap into danger before they're taught to look inward? How many are taught to wrestle lions, but never taught to sit with pain? There's urgency here because the stakes are rising. The modern world moves fast, social pressures are tighter, expectations are higher, and men, caught between the image of the untouchable alpha and the reality of being human, often choose silence, and silence kills. Men are 3 to 4 times more likely to die by suicide than women, not because they feel more pain, but because they're less likely to speak it. That's not bravery, it's tragedy, and it's preventable. We're at a point where awareness isn't enough. It's time for a new narrative, one that redefines what it means to be strong. Not the kind of strength that denies fear, but the kind that stares it down and walks forward anyway. Not the kind of risk that impresses crowds, but the kind that protects futures. Because what's truly heroic isn't risking your life to prove something, it's choosing to live fully, deeply, intentionally, even when the world tells you to shut down, man up, and drive faster. And this is where the story starts to twist again, because the real question isn't just why men take more risks, it's who taught them that their worth depends on it. There's a silent, powerful force shaping the difference between those who thrive and those who just survive, and it's not genetics, luck, or wealth. It's choice. Specifically, the choice to care for one's own body, to listen when it whispers before it screams, to show up at the doctor's office, not just when something's broken, but when it might be. And here's the truth that no one likes to admit. Women are making that choice far more often than men. And that choice, repeated over a lifetime, adds up not just in years, but in vitality, in clarity, in legacy. Let's hit pause for a moment and face the uncomfortable question. Why is it that so many men avoid taking care of their health until it's too late? What makes a man drive a car to the mechanic at the first weird noise, but ignore chest pain for 3 days? There's a dark humor in it how men will research every stat of their favorite sports team, but can't name the last time they got a physical. Funny until it's fatal. Because every missed checkup, every ignored symptom, every late night pain waved off as just stress becomes a thread in a larger, tragic tapestry. From the beginning, women are socialized to be caretakers of others and, more importantly, of themselves. They're more likely to track their health, to be attuned to changes in their bodies, to act on early warning signs. While some of this comes from necessity, like navigating menstruation, pregnancy, or menopause, it becomes a pattern of attentiveness. Women are taught in both subtle and loud ways that their health matters, that their voice matters, that paying attention to their well being isn't weakness, it's wisdom, and that internal culture forms a shield over time. Men, on the other hand, are often fed a different message: be strong, be stoic, shake it off. These phrases, echoing across locker rooms, job sites, and dinner tables, sound like strength, but they're often just silence in disguise. Silence that keeps men from speaking up, from getting help, from preventing what could have been prevented. There's a haunting irony in how the refusal to appear weak becomes the very thing that weakens them. And the consequences of this go far beyond discomfort. They lead to higher rates of preventable disease, lower life expectancy, and countless lives lost in slow, silent battles. Now let's stir the pot with a quick pattern interrupt. Picture this: a man sneezes twice and claims he's dying of the flu. But when he has persistent back pain and blurred vision, he says, it's probably just tiredness. Sound familiar? It's not that men don't feel the pain, it's that they're trained to filter it through a lens of invulnerability. That lens distorts reality. It creates blind spots. And in those blind spots, disease festers, mental health deteriorates, and the clock ticks down quietly. Let's move into the rhythm of daily choices. Women are more likely to eat vegetables, drink water, and engage in preventive care. They build routines that support long-term wellness rather than chasing short-term comfort. They go to therapy more often, they exercise in sustainable ways, and they are significantly more likely to seek out community-based support systems. These aren't just random behaviors, they are lifelines, habits that create a buffer between them and the ravages of time and stress. Health, after all, is rarely about one dramatic event. It's built or destroyed in the quiet, repetitive decisions of every day: the lunch you choose, the stress you manage or ignore, the sleep you prioritize or postpone. And women as a group have historically leaned toward habits that promote longevity, not because they're more disciplined, but because they're more encouraged to care for others, care for their families, care for themselves, and that cascade of care pays dividends that science is only just beginning to quantify. We must talk about mental health too, because what happens in the body is inseparable from what happens in the mind. Women are more likely to acknowledge emotional struggles, to talk about anxiety, depression, trauma. That's not weakness, it's strategy. Emotional pain that's buried doesn't disappear. It metastasizes. It surfaces in sleepless nights, in substance abuse, in explosive anger, in numbness. Men too often carry these unspoken weights, wearing masks that smile while the soul cries. And each unaddressed wound becomes one more reason the statistics tilt toward shorter, more painful lives. But what if that could change? What if men redefine strength not as the ability to carry everything alone, but as the wisdom to set it down and ask for support? Imagine a world where going to therapy wasn't taboo, where preventive medicine wasn't mocked, where tracking your blood pressure was as normal as tracking your fantasy football score. The urgency is real because the cost of inaction isn't just personal, it's generational. Families lose fathers too early. Children grow up without grandfathers. Partners grieve lives that could have stretched further, shine longer. And here's a twist to keep you leaning in. This isn't just about living longer, it's about living better. Because what's the point of an extra 5 years if they're filled with preventable illness, if the last decade is spent managing chronic disease that could have been delayed or avoided entirely? Women, by choosing early intervention and consistency, often experience not just longer lives, but healthier ones. More energy, more mobility, more clarity. And isn't that the goal? Not just to survive, but to thrive. Let's not ignore the cultural layer here. Media, advertising, and even healthcare systems have played roles in these divides. Women are targeted by wellness campaigns. They're told to go for screenings, reminded about mammograms, nudged toward regular gynecological visits. Men, meanwhile, are often left in the dark, except when it's time to treat a problem already too advanced. There's less emphasis on early detection, on emotional intelligence, on building resilience from the inside out. That's not just negligence, it's a lost opportunity, one that we must reclaim. And yet, change is possible. Habits can shift, narratives can evolve. But it starts with awareness, with calling out the gap and challenging the scripts that no longer serve us. Because if women have shown us anything, it's that health is not a mystery, it's a method. It's not magic, it's maintenance. It's not about perfection, it's about paying attention. And attention, when practiced over time, becomes transformation. But here's the cliffhanger that should stay with you. If women are adding years through intentional care and men are losing them through silent neglect, what would happen if that gap were closed not by accident, but by decision? It begins with a heartbeat steady, strong, rhythmic. It's the soundtrack of life, pulsing from the moment we take our first breath. But for millions of men, that very rhythm becomes a ticking clock, a countdown masked by silence. What if I told you that the most dangerous enemy to a man's life isn't outside, but within his own chest? That it isn't sudden, loud, or cinematic, but quiet, creeping, and invisible until it's not. Chronic diseases like heart attacks, strokes, and hypertension aren't just numbers in medical journals. They are the silent assassins that stalk men earlier, faster, and harder. And the tragedy? Most of them never saw it coming. Now pause. Ask yourself, why are men more likely to suffer from fatal chronic diseases at younger ages than women? Is it biology, behavior, fate? The answer isn't simple, but the impact is devastating. Picture a man in his early 40s, seemingly healthy, strong, maybe even the life of the party. No one expects him to collapse from a heart attack. No one anticipates the stroke that steals his speech. Yet it happens far more often than we care to admit. And each of these stories isn't just a statistic. They are fathers, brothers, mentors, leaders gone too soon, often because the warning signs were ignored or misunderstood. There's something dangerous about silence, about normalizing symptoms like fatigue, chest tightness, shortness of breath. Men trained to endure, to suppress, to push through often treat these as annoyances, not alarms. They don't want to be seen as weak. They don't want to make a fuss. But chronic illness doesn't wait for a man to be ready. It doesn't ask permission before attacking. It builds slowly and silently, brick by brick, until one day the body can't hold the weight. Let's throw in a little humor here to ease the tension. Ever notice how men will Google how to fix a lawnmower for 2 hours, but won't Google the symptoms of a heart attack? They'll limp on a twisted ankle for a week and say, it's fine, but panic when the Wi-Fi drops for 5 minutes. The disconnect is both funny and terrifying, because while we laugh about stubbornness, it hides a deeper, deadlier pattern, chronic neglect of chronic signs. And that neglect is costing lives. But it's not just the heart. Chronic diseases come in many forms: diabetes, high cholesterol, kidney disease, liver dysfunction, and in nearly every category, men are hit harder and earlier. This isn't just about wear and tear. It's about lifestyles that compound risk. High stress jobs, poor diets, lack of sleep, minimal physical activity, and above all, the belief that health is something you fix only when it's broken. But the body doesn't work like a machine you can repair in the garage. It's a living system that either thrives with consistent care or deteriorates quietly in its absence. Why do women seem to fare better? It's not just hormones, though those do play a role. Estrogen, for example, offers cardiovascular protection, delaying the onset of certain diseases. But beyond biology, women are more proactive. They engage in preventive care. They notice subtle shifts in their health. They ask questions, seek guidance, and follow through. That vigilance gives them a head start, one that men could have too, if only they allowed themselves the same level of attention. Let's make this more real. Picture a man who's been feeling unusually tired. He chalks it up to work stress. A few months later, he starts getting winded climbing stairs. Maybe he's just out of shape. Then comes the occasional chest tightness, but only during heavy lifting, so he dismisses it. Until the day it becomes impossible to ignore. Until he's in the being told he had a warning heart attack and should have come in weeks ago. This isn't rare, it's disturbingly common, and it starts with the belief that acknowledging pain is somehow unmanly. This belief system, built over decades, is deeply ingrained. Boys are told to toughen up, to be strong, to never complain. By the time they become men, this mindset is no longer a choice, it's a reflex. But strength is not denial. Courage is not silence. Real power lies in the ability to pay attention, to act early, to protect the vessel carrying you through this life. Because the cost of chronic disease isn't just physical, it's emotional, relational, financial. It robs people not just of years, but of quality of energy, freedom, dreams. The healthcare system hasn't made it easier either. Many men feel alienated by medical environments. They're less likely to have regular checkups, less likely to ask questions, more likely to delay care until it's urgent. That means chronic conditions are caught later, when they're harder to treat and more likely to be fatal. Prevention becomes reaction. Opportunity becomes crisis. And all of this is avoidable with the right mindset, the right habits, and the willingness to redefine what health really means. Now imagine this. What if men flipped the script? What if instead of waiting for disease, they built habits that deflected it? What if they approached their bodies with the same strategy they apply to building businesses, managing finances, or coaching sports? What if they became the CEOs of their own health, tracking numbers, measuring progress, making decisions with intention? This isn't a fantasy, it's a necessity, because the game is already underway, and the clock isn't waiting. There's something else we don't talk about enough: the ripple effect. When a man falls ill or dies prematurely from a chronic disease, the impact doesn't stop with him. It hits families, communities, generations. Children grow up with loss. Partners carry the weight of grief. Workplaces lose leaders. Society loses wisdom. And all of it was preventable if only the signs had been taken seriously. If only the habits had shifted earlier. If only vulnerability had been seen as a strength, not a flaw. But what if the turning point is now? What if the rising awareness around men's health isn't just a trend, but a revolution? What if every man began asking the hard questions, not just about where he's going, but how he's getting there and whether his body will still carry him when he arrives? What if we taught boys that being brave includes getting a checkup? That strength includes saying something doesn't feel right. That wisdom includes knowing when to rest, when to speak, when to change. And here's the final question, the one that lingers like a drumbeat under every word. If men are more vulnerable to chronic disease, not because they're weaker, but because they've been taught not to care, then what happens when they finally do?